the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Guerrilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host Paul Spain, and joining me today we have Shaun Edlin from Dotterel, founder and CEO. Welcome along, Shaun. How are you?
Thank you. Oh, really good, thanks, and super excited to be on the show. I feel like we've spoken about this before, so it's been a long time in the making.
Yeah, no, it's great to be kicking in. So yeah, there's been a lot going on with Dotterel. There's been I saw a press release in the last few days about influx of investment, which is always exciting and encouraging, and great to see our innovative New Zealand firms doing well. So definitely keen to really delve in and hear a bit about the Dotterel story. Maybe before we get into sort of the news and bits and pieces, you give us just a little intro in terms of what the company does and where you broadly fit into this sort of world of tech in New Zealand.
Absolutely. So Dotterel are really global specialists in enabling audio in really challenging high noise environments. And the product that we're starting to speak about at the moment is what we call Conos, which is a breakthrough new microphone technology that uses the power of 80 microphones in a very small form factor to form what we call cones of sound. This allows users to capture very clear, crisp sound in very high noise, uncontrolled environments. And being able to do that today is really being constrained and limited by existing microphone technology. So yeah, we're starting to be quite loud about this breakthrough new microphone product, and you'll be seeing lots of it over the coming months.
That sounds really interesting, and it definitely sounds like something that's sort of tech enabled. The idea of having 80 microphones. This is kind of not the norm, but we have seen this sort of increase in the number of mics and improvements in this technology. I was looking at a video conferencing system that we will delve into on the podcast in the coming weeks. That technology is getting a lot more accessible. And
Definitely.
This is one from a company called Yealink that make Teams and Zoom systems. And this simple looking little bar had, I think, 8 microphones in it, and then a couple of different cameras, and of course also when we look at our smartphones and the way that photos are taken now, by combining together lots and lots of shots and some AI and all sorts of smarts, what we see is quite mind blowing compared to what was possible a few years ago. In fact, I've been testing out some new phones recently, the Samsung S22 and Oppo's new one as well, and sort of getting a bit of a feel for their low light technology. And I took a shot at home with the light sort of out in the room I was in, but a little bit of ambient light coming through. And then I was comparing the photo that I had taken to what I was seeing with my naked eye, and the photo was just mind blowing. It
Better
looked
than
as
real
though,
life.
It was just like, but how did they get that color and how's that possible? So this is what I'm imagining that you're doing the impossible with your microphones.
We've had that comment before. We've had the comment, hey, it sounds better than I can hear with my own ears. And that's always lovely to hear. But I guess, to your point, that there is innovation in this space. You'd also be surprised. I mean, the mics we have in front of us right now, single little condenser mic at the end of a long tube, that really is the norm. And it has been for 40, 50 years. That what we use in production. And when you place it next to these amazingly innovative cameras and other sensor technology that you see on things like film sets, these kind of seem antiquated, and it's quite old technology. We're all about kind of bringing this into the current century.
That's cool. I can just imagine so many possibilities. I don't know what that means for our podcast New Zealand studios, and whether anyone's going to want to hire a studio with audio treatment in future, because your mics are going to be so good that you'll be able to be out, wandering out in the street, and it'll be just as good as what you need.
I've got some thoughts. I think for radio and podcasts, I think we can do some pretty exciting stuff with our mic.
Excellent. Oh well, we're certainly happy to be guinea pigs on that front. So other things going on now. Before we started, you were talking about having worked at LanzaTech, and of course their IPO got announced earlier on in the month.
Big
Their
IPO.
their listing in the US. What can you share about?
Well, I can.
From your experience here, and how you think that looks.
I can share a little bit. As the founding team of Dotterel are all ex LanzaTech, and Shaun Simpson is actually our chairman, which he's very involved in the company. Dotterel and LanzaTech have a very good relationship. But I think the things that really stick out to me with that very big IPO, and drawing parallels to the successes of Rocket Lab, is that it's just amazing for the New Zealand deep tech industry. It's the LanzaTechs and the Rocket Labs which are doing like really sci-fi stuff. They're sending rockets to space. They've got microbial industrial processes, like really hard science. But they're actually, they've made it commercial. They've had like these big, liquidity events, big capital events. And, I think as a deep tech founder and someone who's really passionate about that scene, it just is amazing for the industry here. The other reason it's really exciting as well, and I think just there's such a great story around LanzaTech and Rocket Lab at the moment. And that is that if you look at LanzaTech, what was created out of it, when that company moved overseas, it just kind of gave birth to all these deep tech companies who went on the journey of LanzaTech, saw like, hey, we can probably do that too. And then you got Avatana, you've got Mint, you've got Dotterel, and others. I remember in those final days of LanzaTech before it moved offshore, just everyone was creating companies. It was awesome. And then you've got people like Peter Beck and Rocket Lab who are like really actively investing into like the really hard science and deep tech at the moment. And so a huge amount of give back into the New Zealand deep tech scene. I think we're really proud of what LanzaTech have achieved, and Shaun Simpson and everyone else there, and it's fantastic for NZ Inc.
Yeah, and as you say, there's this incredible flow on, and not just from LanzaTech, but we kind of look across, the tech landscape, and there's so many firms that have been, built out of the success of others that have done well, and maybe those firms have been sold off, and there's been a little bit of it's just disappointing that they're no longer a New Zealand company and so on. But actually, when that happens, there is actually so much of a flow on, and the children, as it were, in terms of these child companies that sort of come out and have been made possible from all the learnings in the past. It's phenomenal. It'd be really interesting to actually map that out. So and I'm sure there must be some data geek listening.
Oh, for sure.
Probably do it. It'll be so fascinating to see what those flow-ons.
Even if you like before those events happen, if you just look at the journeys and the number of a lot of it's offshore venture capital that has created huge amount of jobs, huge amount of capability. If you look at that economic impact piece there, there's some really interesting figures to look at what these companies.
Yeah, and even Navman, which we don't talk much about these days, but the flow on from what Sir Peter Mayer and the team sort of built with Navman is is one of the many ones where we've seen lots of good stuff. So.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Other things going on in the news. So, $2.2 billion, by the way, was what I read for LanzaTech's SPAC, as they're calling it, rather than a traditional, share market listing. Seems to be the
buzzword,
the way to go. But that's a pretty interesting place to to start out in terms of a number. So,
Definitely.
I think often we sort of we wonder what's the scale and the value of of these entities, and the listing aspect is pretty helpful from that perspective to get a feel of what the market thinks something is actually worth.
I mean, in particular, because it's such huge amounts of time and huge amounts of investment that goes to get the company there, where you're building colossal plants, you're building rocket factories. So it's kind of nice to see what that end result is on a value basis.
Yeah. They're also on a New Zealand front. A couple of other things on a New Zealand front before we sort of start talking a little bit more global. A report has come through from a company called Uswitch, and New Zealand has landed number 5 among OECD countries in terms of our broadband performance. Sort of looking at home broadband performance. So that's pretty reasonable. But what caught me off guard with this news was that, and it's not completely global because it's just OECD, but that Chile was at the top of the list.
Forefront.
And my immediate, I don't know, bias, whatever you want to call it, but my immediate thing was, no, that's completely rubbish. This is not a part of the world where it would be cost effective, surely, to deliver fiber to to every home and to be at a position where they're at the top. How does that stack up? So I did a bit of reading. I didn't find a huge amount in English on the topic, but there is data from a range of sources that are backing this up. That average home is getting 200 megabits per second, and the plans that I had a look at. I went to an internet service provider website in Chile, had it translated thanks to Google into English, so I could, have a reasonable, understanding of what it was saying. And everything seems to be based around 500 megabits per second fiber. That's just how it is there.
Yeah.
And then I did a quick Google on, well, what does this thing cost of converting it from Chilean pesos into New Zealand dollars? And a little bit under $20 a month for a 500 megabits per second connection. So, I can see that being something that would have a huge impact on their economy. It just seems like a phenomenally smart move.
Definitely.
And, obviously, it's these things take a lot of time, as we've seen in New Zealand, but they now seem to be at a point where they're it's growing very, very quickly, and price wise however the government have done it. And I'm not quite sure of what their mix is between sort of private and public investment there, but pretty phenomenal results.
Do you know what countries kind of fall between in NZ and
so Chile was at the top, then Denmark, United States, and Spain on this list. Now, I always think New Zealand, well, for a reasonable period of time, I've thought New Zealand has better broadband generally than the US, because it's really sort of splintered in the US, and a lot of people can't get fiber. So if I sort of spent a day researching this, I could probably share a lot more, and probably some sort of comparative information. It was surprising that Singapore. Where was I'm just trying to see where Singapore was on the list. Singapore and South Korea are two that have also gone down that fiber track, which the US has yet to actually do. So quite interesting. At the bottom of the list was Turkey, Greece, and Mexico. Just trying to have a look to see on this list. Maybe, and I'm not sure which countries are actually in the OECD, but they've got South Korea basically hovering around 100 megabits per second. and 14th place. So some of these things are going to be heavily influenced by what the default plan and offering is in that market.
Yeah.
So you can imagine Chile, they might have just decided, look, we're gonna start at 500 megabits per second, and that might push us up the list or whatever their different goals were. But boy, it looks good, right?
Absolutely.
And something. We certainly see our speeds increasing in New Zealand as Chorus and the local fibre companies make changes to the standard speeds.
I'd love to kind of know the step change for New Zealand, because I imagine we've kind of shot up to that fifth spot very rapidly, right?
Well, we've been doing well for a while because of the ultra fast broadband. Where we have changed, and there's a new report that's just come through from the government today that I saw through from Crown Infrastructure Partners. They forwarded through a press release from Minister Dr. David Clark, highlighting some of the growth for New Zealand. We've hit, I think the number was 60. I just want to check this before coming out with something that's complete rubbish. So UFB availability has expanded. We're at 86% of the population have access to it. I think the target at this stage is about 87%. So we're really close. To being there in terms of who's got it. And then that last 13% catered to with the rural broadband initiative. We get some benefit there of the new satellite connectivity from the likes of Starlink as well that come in to fill in the gaps. Interesting though, I think we do get some confusion in the market around the different options. And that's as something we've been talking about in the podcast. In the last few weeks, to do with people getting a communication from a telco, warning them or alerting them that their copper is going to be cut off in the future, and saying, "Hey, we're moving you to a fixed wireless connection." Now, someone I spoke with in Rotorua in the last week, he had messaged me via Twitter and said, "Paul, what's the best satellite connection?" And he was convinced that he needed a satellite internet connection for his home. And we had a look, and he was getting a 3 megabit per second on his copper connection. So pretty rubbish, right?
Yeah.
And upload speed was under a megabit. So not really useful for whether it's him doing work from home or other members of the family, doing work, bit of gaming, streaming, all the usual things. So not very conducive to that, right?
Not particularly usable for any of those things.
So, I pinged back. I said, well, check out the national broadband map, but if there's nothing else on there, then satellite. And he sort of, he'd come back with, no, tell me about the satellite. So he was convinced that was the only option. Which was really interesting. I think he was with Spark. I'm not sure whether Spark have a good fixed wireless service in that area. In his case, he got hold of Vodafone and was messaging me back 3 or 4 days later to say he had moved to a Vodafone fixed wireless connection. He was getting 10 times the speed of his DSL, and he was paying a lower fee than what he had paid with his previous service provider. So it does pay to actually check this stuff. I would be very curious in terms of how Chile are operating in terms of how they've done what they've done to get there. And there is an area of it being a sort of competitive landscape where probably there are a bunch of countries that could choose to do, turn some knobs and position themselves at the top or very, high up the list. But I think, what New Zealand's got is a reflection of the initial broadband investment, which I think that the initial target was is it 75% of the population, if I remember rightly, and then the government's kept investing into that.
Where's Oz on that list?
They weren't doing quite so well.
Sweet.
Which is from that Kiwi Aussie rivalry perspective, long may it stay the same. But for when we visit Australia and spend time over there, and for our Australian friends, we hope they move up. And
definitely,
number 6 behind New Zealand is just fine. But I think that they do have a challenge in terms of the approach they've taken with the national broadband network there, NBN as they call it. So they're sitting around 50 megabits per second, and New Zealand's over 113. So we're definitely heading in the right direction there. Okay, so on to other topics, and there's a lot of other stuff going in there. So for those that are interested, worth having a look at Crown Fibre Infrastructure's website for that new report that's out, and there's the details there around the sort of expansion, and there's the mobile sort of black spot thing that Labor was one of Labor's things, and since they've been in government, they've that coverage on highways has increased by 983 kilometres of extra highway coverage around the country. So that's something that obviously as a work in progress, but that's that's phenomenal. Lots of places in the country where in the past you just wouldn't have got any coverage. Now you're able to get your data if you need it, but you can also call the 111 or whatever it is. Given the
just
scenario.
Spoiled. I just want 5G at my house in Titirangi, way out in the bush.
Well, 5G is interesting because I was looking last week at our 5G coverage around the country, and it's a very small percentage of the land mass in terms of population areas. Like sitting here where we are, Auckland CBD, the studio, we can get 5G. But a lot of homes around Auckland, there is no 5G.
It's really just the CBD waterfront.
And in fact, where my friend was, and sort of a little bit out of Rotorua, I had a look, and there was no sign of any Spark 5G in Rotorua at all. For Vodafone, he was being shown on, according to their map, as actually having 5G coverage. And so, Vodafone seems to be very much at the forefront on the 5G at the moment. Spark probably aren't, a million miles behind, but they're certainly a step back. And then, of course, 2 degrees are kind of just getting started on that front. So, now the other thing that caught my attention in terms of New Zealand is this new offshore wind farm, taking advantage of all that wind that blows across the oceans. Potentially a $5 billion wind farm being built. New Zealand Super Fund have made that announcement of a joint venture with the Danish infrastructure fund. Interestingly, with a very similar name to the government entity we were just talking about. This one was also called CIP, but not rather than Crown Infrastructure Partners, is Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners who are involved in this one, and South Taranaki, and they're talking about it providing over 11% of New Zealand's current electricity demand capacity.
Wow!
And that could even be expanded. They could potentially double it in size. Now, of course, there is an issue with wind, is that the wind isn't always blowing or not at full capacity. But in terms of moving New Zealand from the pretty enviable position we're in at the moment, where the very large majority of our power is from a renewable source, that this could be the thing that takes us, up into the 90 plus, percent perspective, and it suggests it's
which
only
we're already very close, right?
we've I mean, with the coal use over the last couple of years, it's been, we probably haven't been quite as high as what we have been in the past, but this could take us into the 90s, and it seems like a pretty exciting move.
Do you know the percentage that is attributable to wind at the moment?
That is a very good question. You're putting me putting me on the spot. I don't know. I'm interested to find out. 5.1% was what we got out of wind energy from windenergy.org.nz as of 2019. So this would triple New Zealand's capacity, or if they spend more. And the other bit that caught my attention was it sounded like this could potentially happen, quite fast. Couple of years work to build it, and that in itself is quite encouraging, because we're used to infrastructure projects take a very, very long time. So I'm not quite sure I've got my head around that being a reality, but maybe we'll check in early 2024 and
sounds
see
aggressive, doesn't it?
What state that we're
and then we just wait for the backlash over what it's doing to the scenery. I don't know if you've driven through many big wind farms or been around many.
Yeah, probably a lot. The biggest that I can recall would have been in a drive from Los Angeles
to Vegas.
No, to where was it? I'm going to have to remember where it was.
There's a few big ones around California, and they're beautiful. Like they're amazing feats of engineering as you drive through them. But definitely people there'll be issues, and I'll be very interested to know where in Taranaki that would sit. And
well, I understand this is an ocean-based one, and so it is quite different from that perspective. Was speaking to a friend recently who's in Brighton in the UK, and I did not know this because it wasn't there when I visited Brighton, in the last decade. But now you can see this wind farm
on the horizon, right?
I
used to live in Brighton, and I remember when it was kind of starting to be built up, and the same thing. Always a bit of backlash, like, "Oh, you've ruined my picturesque view." But I think they look cool.
Phoenix, Arizona. That was where we drove through. I
think I've driven through that. I've done that LA to Phoenix drive before. It's a really long one, but a lot of just nothing.
Really
hot,
super
hot.
I think I lasted about maybe a minute. I thought, how long can I last with the air conditioning off? And it must have been out in the desert there. I don't know. When we got to Phoenix, it was in the 40s. And so driving through the desert, you can imagine it probably getting even hotter.
It was in Arizona on one of the hottest days on record, and there were people like passing out on the runways at the airport. You just walk outside of your room and you just get you can't breathe for a moment. It's so intense.
I couldn't believe it. Our friends were like, come on, let's go outside for a barbecue. What? Quite comfortable inside, thanks. Some I think some exciting moves forward to see that happening.
Absolutely.
And we're just going to have to see how it all plays out.
Interestingly, there's with our microphone product Konos, there's been a number of use cases within wind farms which you wouldn't usually connect, but being able to monitor the kind of mechanical health through sounds and using acoustics to kind of be able to detect whether there's small stress fractures.
Oh,
And
brilliant.
that's actually one of the, like, sound is how you monitor lots of machinery and wind farms in particular. So, but you need something that cuts through and just gets that bit of machinery.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's cool. In terms of international, this is kind of, yeah, as usual, lots of things going on. Bit of coverage around what the European Union are doing, the European Commission with their Digital Markets Act, and yeah, quite fascinating. Yeah, just sort of reading through, and they've kind of got this simplified view on their website ec.europa.eu, where they talk about this new Digital Markets Act, and there's a list. What does this mean for the gatekeepers? And what we're talking about there, I guess there's a range of entities that are potentially going to get covered by this.
yeah,
But if I'm not getting my legislation mixed up, we've got on one side we've got things like the app stores that are certainly on the Apple side are very very much.
it's
Well, that's that's locked up. It's
there's
with
one
Apple,
source.
right?
Yeah,
But then you've also got talk about requirements for the likes of WhatsApp and iMessage to be able to talk with each other and with other sort of smaller platforms, which is quite fascinating,
yeah.
isn't it? Because
Well, I
it'd be
think.
a huge change.
Oh,
Like,
hey, I mean,
these little, I mean, Apple's been the walled garden since, forever, right?
for sure. I mean, from a consumer perspective, how many different messaging apps do I have on my phone at the moment, and kind of have an aggregator, or just be able to get my messenger messages through my iMessage is like, for me, I'll actually read some of them and I'll get some of those messages. But then,
Yeah.
there's also, well, I'd love to understand how that interoperability impacts those smaller companies that are kind of maybe, it's messaging startups, where I feel like, kind of 5, maybe even 10 years ago, there was just a flood of so many of those messaging apps, but quite a lot of innovation as well. Now we've got a select few on the peripherals, but they all kind of do the same thing. So will it spark a little bit of innovation if you've got an opening and not just these big giants and messages? Maybe.
Yeah, look, I think that there's probably a whole lot you could sort of delve into on this one, because it could change that messaging front. But what does it do to Apple? Obviously, from a shareholder perspective, I'd be if you've got Apple stock, I'd be watching it reasonably closely at the moment. It's one that I don't, well, maybe through some sort of managed fund or something, but not one that I'm generally following super closely. But you could imagine that if this goes ahead and what we're seeing, then the idea of Apple having any sort of preference, sort of the indications are that you can't put yourself in a better position
Yeah.
than other players, and so somebody else has their app store. Huawei, they've got an app store.
Yeah.
You get that on your phone, and you have to get all your, could you choose that? And they maybe, if they were to come into the market with an app store for iOS and their prices were lower than everyone else, some people are going to pick that, right?
For sure, and Apple's not going to like it.
So
I,
it's
I think like that's a really interesting one. I mean, I've got to admit, a little bit of an Apple fanboy. I've got my iPad in front of me at the moment, and at Dotterel, surrounded by engineers who are like diehard Windows, Android users, and like the biggest complaint from them is on like why there's a bit of Apple hate from the more hardcore engineers, is that you just cannot get access to a lot of software. You're really constrained to this ecosystem, and like, so opening up that ecosystem, which Apple seems to progressively been doing over the last 5 years, I think overall is a good thing. If we can use some of our simulation software now on some of the tablets, and that's excellent. But then from, I guess, an Apple user, a consumer, like part of the reason I use Apple, like I like iPhones, I like iPads, is they're just known to be robust and reliable and trustworthy, and that trust kind of comes from the control that they have over the software. Like, I don't think I would be using a third party. I mean, you can already kind of sideload with I've done it before with my phone, but
beta apps and
yeah,
remote,
you can. There's ways you can do it already, but it
yeah.
doesn't feel safe. And so, I can kind of understand Apple's pushback, the argument on, but security is a pretty big thing, and it's actually what makes these such good products is that they have those tight controls. So, yeah, I don't really know if I'm for or against that.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that one progresses,
Yeah.
and there will certainly be a huge flow on, if that goes ahead. The other big thing that has caught my attention this week is a blog post. It's been picked up by some reasonably large media outlets, and this is the title: Microsoft is using illegal bribes in the Middle East and Canada. Why is the SEC, which is the US government entity, Securities and Exchange Commission, why is the SEC turning a blind eye? And this is a story from someone who spent around 20 years with Microsoft. This is written by Yasser Albd. I don't know how you pronounce that. I'm sure I've stuffed that up. But it's a blog post on a site called lioness.co. And it's been referenced by a whole lot of media. It is quite a long, post in terms of, sharing thoughts on these allegations of illegal bribery, and down to the perspective of getting ejected, from Microsoft for trying to make a bit of a stand against it. Now, I see a response from Microsoft saying this stuff is historical.
Yeah, that's what I understood. It was old news.
It's not happening. Yeah. It's old news. But it just kind of got me thinking a little bit. We live in New Zealand, which on the sort of scale of corruption is usually in the top sort of 1, 2, 3 countries in the world in terms of certainly how we're perceived from a corruption standpoint, which makes things pretty easy in New Zealand. But
definitely,
we were chatting before we started around some of the countries we've visited, and it's always seemed to me it's those countries who have got the weaker economies and maybe struggle to pay people well, where we've seen corruption. I think you even mentioned an example in India, right?
I think just sort of across Southeast Asia, there's often expectations on it's kind of quite systematic that you pay certain people in high positions and all police, and it's just that's the way it works, and live with it. But it's, I guess I would love to understand. There's no real information from what I could see what these bribes have been. Is it bribery, or is it lobbying?
I mean, if you read the full blog post, which certainly takes some time, it goes into some very specific sort of scenarios, and highlights. And this is the thing; it's different to those sort of scenarios of law enforcement in countries where those that work in law enforcement just don't appear to be actually being paid enough to live very well to start with. So there's you can sort of without sort of saying this is right and fair and appropriate, because it's not, but you can understand people maybe being driven a bit more that way. But this one seems to talk about people that are within Microsoft and other organizations that are actually, in scenarios where they're probably earning reasonably,
Yeah.
good funds.
Yeah.
So I certainly hope, this is in the past, but it just really got me thinking around, okay, what challenges do we need to consider? Microsoft have been through this. Who knows? We don't know the facts. Maybe there are still, issues going on in certain, certain parts of the world. You can imagine that being the case. But as the world sort of becomes flatter in that sense of, New Zealand employers having to employ people in more and more different parts of the world, that seems to be quite common to have a very globalized workforce, whether it's software development or all sorts of areas. How are we going to deal with this? And I've been looking into some of the countries that are quite common for offshoring, and what we see on these lists from a corruption perspective is not very encouraging, and the things that we hear around sort of mafia and organized crime and and the like. That's right, I've had my phone go off in a podcast too. The mic probably didn't catch too much of it, so you're all good. You're welcome to duck out if you need to, but I would quite enjoy having you here for this next segment, because kind of want to hear a little bit a little bit more about Dotterel.
Absolutely.
And we're probably going to have a another episode in the future, where we sort of drill into the bigger learnings and stories and so on. But you shared a little bit around the co-founders having come out of LanzaTech and so on. But how did that actually come about, and where are you at now?
Yeah, so the co-founders were all based at LanzaTech when the idea of Dotterel kind of came to inception. It actually started when we entered an innovation engineering competition called the C Prize. Callahan funded. We did the first one, and that competition where we were solving numerous problems with drones for the entertainment market. It was kind of judged by some quite industry heavyweights, and we came runner up in that. We were solving a problem of noise for entertainment, but also kind of how you can capture audio in this very loud environment. Took us to a couple of big trade shows where we won a few awards with early product, and really kind of demonstrated for us that, hey, there's a real market for what we're doing. We're solving a real problem in the drone market. So kind of fast forward a bit, we developed some excellent microphone arrays that are made for drones, kind of one of the most acoustically demanding environments you could put a microphone on. And in doing so, kind of achieving a high number of world firsts. I mean, we were doing search and rescue exercises, finding people on the drone, like not just limited to visual sensors, but also people yelling out for help that won't often show up on these sensors, hearing them yell for help, getting close, asking them, who are you? Are you injured? Is there anyone else with you?
Wow, where has that technology been utilized?
We've largely done those exercises in New Zealand. They've been local ones, but yes, we've got good relationships within Europe in particular, and we're gearing up for some big exercises over there.
That's cool.
And we've done a bit in the US with the drones, with things like long distance hostage negotiations, getting a drone to the top of a high rise in a mock shooter scenario. Being able to find out from a potential hostage, where is the shooter, where are the hostages, are you okay? All information at the moment, though, the police or the operational team, they've kind of limited to throwing a phone in a window and hoping someone picks up. So really, a lot of the use cases for us were about enabling audio and communication at long distances, keeping people safe, what we call de-escalation through dialogue, and doing it all very rapidly and quickly. We'd also done quite a lot of work in the film industry as well, at the same time, kind of working on some big productions. It wasn't really until 2 years ago that, in working with multiple segments on our drone solution, we had quite a lot of users ask us, well, hey, your drone's noisy, but so is this vehicle, and so is this ground robot, and I can't hear in this certain environment. So we all of a sudden started looking at much more as a platform technology that wasn't just limited to drones, started demonstrating its efficacy on these other very noisy platforms. But we also had, because we're doing work in the screen industry, we also had sound engineers saying, hey, can I just use that as a really kind of new type of shotgun microphone on this film? So deploying it on film sets and TV shows and all kinds of things, the feedback that we were getting from that entertainment market was phenomenal in terms of kind of the quality of the mic, these really new features that have never been seen before in a microphone. And it was like, mid last year only that we kind of said, all right, product for entertainment, that's this first microphone standalone product. And it's been full noise on production and engineering and working with end users, taking their requirements to create this really amazing microphone product.
Wow. So when does that hit the market?
We're expecting later this year. We're currently at pre-production phase. So really since the beginning, so mid last year, we've had a number of early product versions kind of be out there in the field in lots of different exciting use cases, entertainment and others, other markets. And that's all kind of gone into this final product we're creating at the moment, which, a bit later in the year.
And is licensing your technology, is that going to be sort of a key part, or are you generally going to make your own product?
Yeah, it can be part of it, but really for us at this stage, it's about kind of selling hardware and selling product. There's this bigger opportunity for us outside of selling the hardware, which is working with the integrators with some future markets, which I can talk about. Things like getting it incorporated into vehicles, into factories, into your public space monitoring. There, ultimately, we're looking to supply components. There's the microphone arrays that we make, but then there's software licensing aspects, and we could ultimately structure a licensing opportunity out of some of those integration deals. We're actively executing on one such deal at the moment.
Yeah, great. And how competitive is this space? So there are a lot of players that are trying to carve out their own niche.
It's interesting. Like I think I mentioned before, there's so much innovation that goes into cameras and other very visual sensors. But the amount of innovation that goes into microphone technologies has been pretty limited. Like MEMS technology isn't particularly new. It's been around for quite a while, but it really is kind of limited to things like you mentioned, kind of conference room systems or cell phones, but they're not used really in kind of a number of professional applications that we use existing microphones today. So there's long range shotgun microphones, there's microphones that do one thing, but I think that's the defining factor, is that the microphone technology we have today is kind of constrained to doing one thing. Like these microphones we're speaking to now are made to capture a pattern that works for this room. What we've really aimed to create is something that is made for everywhere. It just gives you that ultimate control and flexibility. So you can take it out of the field, effectively turn it into a completely different mic because you're operating in an urban environment. You need to get rid of that vehicle noise. And so that's really, there's no one else that is doing that.
And how much of this is in the mic, and how much of it is sort of machine learning and technology?
It's a real blend of both hardware and software. So the kind of the way that we physically make these very unique arrays, that again is like comprised of 80 individual microphone elements, and then the way that we use that array to form these really unique beam patterns and do some other very unique things like process out that high noise so it's a proper true combination of software and hardware.
Cool. And to walk us through your funding journy, because that's always
definitely
that's always a pretty important part of this
it
stuff.
Is, yeah.
You can't do too much without there being some money. There's only sort of so long you can give away your time on things. So how's that played out?
Definitely. I think like in particular for hardware is hard, and it can take a little bit longer, and it can be just more expensive to develop. Dotterel as a company has been around for close to 5 years now. And we really kind of started with quite reasonably small raises, just kind of being very kind of clear on what we wanted to achieve with a defined level of capital. Over the years, and while this probably doesn't sound like a very small amount, we've probably now got to the stage that we've raised just over $5 million over that period. But ultimately, with each, we've been very kind of disciplined and kind of raising cash to do this and create this milestone, which kind of creates that next inflection point, and for us to be able to, at the moment, kind of now get to a point where we can take really kind of scalable product to market. With this raise in particular, what it allows us to do is hire like some rock stars. We've got some fantastic talent that have come on. We've recently hired a head of market development, head of production, because we're now, and some excellent engineers. And it's allowed us to establish a production facility. So we're out in Mount Wellington in Auckland, and kind of making investing hugely in capability there, and then the ability to kind of, for sales and marketing, just to be in front of our customers now, which is we're heading over to the States in a couple of weeks, and
fantastic,
incredibly excited to be back in front of customers.
Yeah, that's really cool. So and this latest funding round, what was it, $3 million?
Yep,
so
over.
Who did you have in terms of investors initially, and then there are new ones that have come in on this round, or is this a bit of reinvestment?
That was a US number. Was possibly an investor.
Probably the next
there.
investor we've just said no to. We've just sunk the $20 million opportunity there. They're only going to call once. If you don't take that call, Shaun.
We blew it. I should have answered it live
there.
So we've investors, shareholders to date in Dotterel have been one of our earliest and incredibly supportive shareholders is Gelix Ventures from Australia, and we were one of the first investments of that fund. And they've kind of gone from strength to strength. Drone Fund, which is a Japanese based, quite drone specific with their portfolio, venture capital group. And then we have in New Zealand, it's been kind of K1W1, hugely supportive, like just kind of love their investment philosophy. And even University of Auckland, I mean, we've had huge ties to to technology that's come out of the university and commercializing that. So very good relationships there. With this round, we now welcome ISAS Ventures, who led the round. We've had so much to do with those guys over the years, so it's nice to finally have them on the cap table. Peter Beck's come on board. Likewise, we've been around him forever, and he saw this is the right time to invest. Huge market opportunity, and so that's definitely what excites him. And then a few others, NZVC, who are kind of a newer an investor here in. And Scobie Water. There's been some fantastic new shareholders that come on, and all incredibly supportive as well.
Oh, well, that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll certainly look forward to catching up again. Maybe it needs to be a New Zealand business podcast, so that we get the full story. But it's been really interesting and great to have your comments and input across the rest of the news of the week as well.
That's right. It's honored to be on the show. I've always wanted to be. So.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Well, thank you very much, and thanks, of course, also to our show partners, to Vocus, Vodafone, Spark, HP, and Guerrilla Technology for their support of the New Zealand Tech Podcast, and of course of the sort of broader New Zealand tech and innovation ecosystems which they support. So thanks everyone. We'll look forward to catching you next week for the next episode. See ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Guerrilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.